What is going on, lads, and welcome back to the Self-Made Podcast. This is a podcast for men where we talk all about physique development, building a stronger mindset, and all around building a better life for yourself. So, this week it is time for a bit of a catch up because we actually missed out on an episode last week, as it's been a very busy week or weekend for me last week, and we're actually going to start with a mastermind that I've done with my mentor Connor, and it was a great weekend. It was a chance for me to first of all be around people that are in the industry that might have similar goals. And this is something that I've mentioned in the last episode, all about environment, and that was a prime example of myself putting myself in an environment with people who are in the same industry, who have very similar goals, and it's what I believe will push me forward with my own goals. And I think the first important part of this is the importance of having a coach, having a mentor, because it gets lonely out there with your goals. You might have, whether it's physique goals, business goals, whatever it may be, having someone in your corner who has been there, done that, and has shown their ability to help others is extremely important. It's absolutely priceless, having someone there in your corner to just help you find your way of doing things, and just having that bit of support there on your way, because a lot of the times it can be very lonely when it comes to chasing your own goals. And the second part of it is sometimes when you are chasing your goals and you might be making progress, you actually might become the big fish in a small pond, as the saying goes. And that might be because you're training in a gym where the strongest person, you might have the best physique, whatever it may be, and you don't have anybody to chase, if that makes sense. You start to get comfortable because, again, you don't have anything to, or anyone to compare yourself to, and that's something that we're going to kind of touch on as well. But I think exposing yourself to what's possible is extremely important. I think it allows you to actually see how much more you could be potentially doing. And I've no problem saying that I was in a room for the whole weekend. I was in a room where every other person had a business, you could say, more successful than mine. They were doing bigger things, and that is extremely important because you're exposing yourself to what's actually possible. You're exposing yourself to people operating just at a different level, and that is extremely important because you're able to see, okay, this is the struggles that these people have faced along the way. This is how they've dealt with them, and what you could come across on your way to chasing those similar goals. And just overall spending time with like-minded people is, again, priceless, because they understand where you're coming from, why you're doing what you're doing, and they will never second guess your goals. They will never doubt your goals, if that makes sense. They will always be supportive of it because, again, they're on a very similar journey. And as I said, it's something that's very important, is comparison. And I think we've been told not to compare yourself to anybody else, and in a lot of ways I agree with it. But I think being able to compare your work rate to somebody else can be great. Because if you're sitting there, right, and you're thinking to yourself, oh, why don't I have the same, let's say, physique, or the same business, or why am I in the same position as someone else, and you're comparing yourself like that, that can be very pressing, nearly, I would say. Like, you can literally get into your own head so much. just thinking about that in a negative way. But if you actually compare your work rate and think to yourself, rather than saying, oh, why don't I have this, or why does he or she have this, rather think to yourself, like, what is that person doing that I'm not doing? How can I nearly copy or mimic their approach to what they're doing, and use it to my advantage. And again, this is not copying what someone else is saying, but actually copying how they show up. Think about what time are they getting up at, how did they start their day, what did they spend their time on. And that way you can say, okay, is there gaps in my own approach that I could improve with, and that could really help me improve my own situation. So I think that is something to keep in mind, is that comparing yourself can be extremely damaging, and you can get into your own head about why again someone else is doing something, why someone else isn't, and whatnot. But I think being able to look at someone and not be emotional about it, and say, okay, what can I do that is working well for this person? How can I improve my situation and take inspiration from someone else? And I think that's something that, as I said, so many people miss out on. But the second part in our catch up is, if you follow me on Instagram, that you probably would have seen that I jumped into a boxing ring for a fight. Depending on if you follow me or not, and how closely you follow me on Instagram and YouTube and whatnot, I started boxing consistently in January. It is the 1st of March today, and I absolutely love it. Again, as I would have said or mentioned in previous episodes of the podcast, I used to do Thai boxing very consistently. I absolutely loved it for years. Between being 14 and about 18, 19, that's all I've done. Or it took up a majority of my free time, and it was absolutely amazing. I missed it for a very long time, and I actually wanted to get back into some form of combat sports for a long time, but I put it off for whatever reason. I took the jump with it, and I am so happy that I did. At the start of this year, I signed up to a great gym with some great training in there. There's a lot of pro fighters there, and I'm really, really enjoying it. But 5 weeks into my training, what happened was, I've just seen a post on Instagram, because I've had a few gyms that I've followed, and they were putting on a fight night essentially, and they said they're looking for fighters. So I sat there thinking, oh my god, it would be so cool to be able to do it, to jump in. And then I started thinking, oh my god, I've the mastermind that weekend. I've only been training for 5 weeks. I'm probably not fit enough. I haven't had any sparring, and just started making up all these excuses in my head essentially. And maybe they were valid reasons, but I just sat there and I thought to myself, do you know what? Why the fuck am I making these excuses? And in that moment, I just decided that if I don't sign up, at the very least, it's going to hurt my confidence big time, because I know that I could jump in there, and for whatever reason I was again making up these excuses in my head as to why I shouldn't do it. And in that moment I just signed up, and I actually haven't heard anything from them for about a week. I had to text them again to say, right, is there any matches for me, or what's going on? And basically on a Tuesday they confirmed that they have someone there if I want to jump in. I said absolutely, and by Saturday I was in the ring. The fight went well. I when I say went well, I lost a split decision on the night, but considering everything, I was extremely happy with the result. Most importantly, that I jumped in there, because the whole reason of it was to challenge myself, and I think this is going to be the moral of this week's episode, as much as it is really catch up as I see it. But over the last year or so, I've shifted my training approach from solely just physique bodybuilding style training and just chasing getting as big as possible, and I've shifted it towards a little bit more performance, just trying to mix in training that is a little bit more functional, you could say, and that brought a bit of a different approach to it. I've done a high rocks last March. It was great to do, but not really my thing. I tried to include some running. Again, tried it for a good few weeks, and it just wasn't something that was getting me excited. And again, it's another reason why I went back to, or I started boxing at the start of this year, and it's amazing. I really enjoyed it, and it's finally something that has brought excitement to my training, because for the past year what's been happening is I've improved my fitness massively. I've improved my overall mobility, you could say. I feel better. I feel 10 times better than I did, at the start of last year, let's say, both physically, mentally, and just where my training is at, where my head is at. I feel 100 times better. But over the last year, I've realised that my training was becoming a bit stale. My gym training, it was a given to me. Like, I'll never stop training no matter what happens. I'll always have my gym sessions as my base. To me, that is just part of my week. It's just what I do. But there was no real excitement to it. There was no challenge. Like, even when I was trying to do those things like the high rocks, the running, it just didn't really excite me. And it was nearly, I would say, depressing to me, because I love training, and the gym alone just wasn't doing it for me, because there was no purpose behind it of trying to get as big as I possibly can. And it genuinely was a hard time for me, just managing that mentally and showing up where I felt like there was no purpose behind it. I was just doing it because it's part of my life. It's just what I do. And it really did start seeing the comfort of that, and the lack of excitement really bleed into other areas of my life, like my business, just not being as excited about pushing things forward. And just overall in my own approach, last year was where I actually started wanting, going out and having a couple of drinks and going out for dinners all the time, and all of these things that I normally wouldn't do. And it's not that things have gotten out of hand and or whatnot. I've actually had a great balance last year, especially last summer, of managing those things. But it was just because I didn't have a clear goal. I didn't have something to work towards, and that's what I believe. I had to have something to take my mind off it. And again, having that now is absolutely amazing. And just having that change and a goal of something that actually makes me a little bit nervous. Like, when coming into the fight in itself, I wasn't necessarily nervous. I felt great, because it was such short notice. There wasn't much time to even think about it. But when I got in there, that's where nerves really kicked in, and I was excited. I was really buzzing to be in there. And win or lose, it didn't really matter to me at the time. I knew I wasn't as prepared as I possibly could be for it and whatnot. But this is not what it's about. It was about myself, just pushing myself out of my comfort zone and going after it, because this is where, off the back of that fight, I feel amazing. I feel so excited about the goals that I have in place, about my own training, about just my approach to coaching, even how excited I am about that, and where I'm going to take my business. It just completely transformed my thought process into absolutely everything. And this is something that I wanted to say to you: is, when was the last time you done something that was really challenging? When was the last time you really pushed yourself out of your comfort zone? Because I'm telling you now, I couldn't be happier that I did. As much as it was hard to do, as much as it required me to really push myself, obviously physically and mentally, it was one of the best things that I could have done. And especially the fact that I didn't put it off, because having a fight was one of my goals for this year, one of my kind of training goals. But the fact that I just jumped into it and said, okay, this is what I'm doing, and believed in myself, you could say, it was absolutely huge for me. So yeah, ask yourself, if you feel stuck right now, when was the last time you challenged yourself? When was the last time you really pushed your diet, pushed your training, pushed yourself in a physical and a mental way to, really go to the next level, to have something there that requires you to really push hard and push forward? I think that's something really, really important to, ask yourself. And I think it's something that could transform your thought process. So lads, that is going to be it for our little catch up this week. And again, as always, thank you very much for listening if you have been. And I'm looking forward to actually going into comfort and getting out of your comfort zone in a lot more detail this month. I think we're going to have, moving forward, a bit of a theme for every single month, and again go into it in a little bit more detail. So as always, if you have any questions or you want to chat about anything that I've mentioned here today, drop me a message. Again, thank you very much for listening. I hope you have a good day, and I'll chat to you soon.